Hey everybody, DJ here, and this is part 4 of the Epic Text Tutorial series. And in this one, we're going to be covering volumetric lighting and adding some mood to your scene. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to this channel. It'd be really great if you could do that for me. It really helps me out. So let's jump into Blender, and this is where you should have left off. You should have your text here, some really cool materials, and just a reminder for everybody who may have missed it from the last one. I seem to have accidentally forgotten to make the outside material a metal. So just if you're following along exactly with me, make sure that the outside is set to a metallic here. And what we're going to do is we're going to be adding some volumetrics to the scene, some volume absorption and some volume scatter to make the scene look really cool and dynamic. And it's important that you know you're going to do this first because it does change a few things about how your lighting is done in the scene. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start here. So I'm going to go over to the layout view and I'm going to start to split my panels a little bit. But before I really do anything, I'm going to set up my camera to be where the composition is going to end up. So I'm going to hit 0 here. Oh, let me turn on the screencast keys real quick. So you'll see them now in the bottom left. And I'm just going to select the camera and go to view here. Make sure that you, on the view lock, go to camera to view and hit end there. And now basically what I can do is I can move the camera around and change basically where the composition is going to be for this text here. So this isn't 100% perfect. I'm just getting this ready now so that we can save some time later. So I want it to kind of be over here in the corner because I might do this for the uh, thumbnail image for this particular part of the project. And let's do it kind of like this right here. Maybe a little bit closer. No, maybe there. That should be fine. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to split the panel a couple times. So let's do it like this. And one thing really quick, since I split the panel and this had the lock camera to view, it actually made that on all of these. So I'm going to hit N here, deselect the view lock. Same thing over here, go to view, camera view, lock to camera view, and the same thing down here. I'm just going to change that. So I often will forget to do that, and that's just a reminder for all of you. So on this top one here, I'm actually going to use this just to kind of move around the scene. This left one, I'm going to use this as a previewer. And this one down here, I'm going to make the shader editor. Now there's a couple things that's going to happen here when we add the volume absorption. And before we actually view through here, a really quick cool tip for you guys on how to save some time in your viewport rendering. Go over to your render properties and then go right here to render region. And it will only render things inside of your composition over here on the left where the camera is. So if you go to rendered, it will only render that area so you won't waste time rendering things that you're not going to see in your composition. Okay? So basically, this is what it looks like, and we added some environment lighting in the last one. Now, the problem here, and you're going to see it in a second, is when we start to add volume to our environment, we're not actually going to see this lighting, okay? So let's change in this view, in this panel right here, change this to world, and we're going to zoom in a little bit, and you can see that here is the, environment background. Here is the background lighting node. And then right down here, there's this little input for volume. Now, I use OpenCL right now. I think I'm on CPU. No, I'm on GPU. But sometimes when I start to plug things into this world output, it will crash. So you'll see me sometimes go between solid and rendered for this. But and you'll see me save a lot. But that might just be for OpenCL. I'm not 100% sure. So let's go ahead and start. So in here, we're going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add a principled, sorry, not principled volume. We're going to add a volume scatter, okay? And we're going to add a volume absorption. And I'm going to tell you what these do, but before I tell you how these work, I'm just going to add them here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take both the scatter and the absorption here, and we're not going to use a mix node. We're going to use a shader add shader. So basically, it's just going to take information from this one and this one and then put that into the volume here. And if we just look through here into the rendered view, and I'm going to get rid of this panel, you can see that everything is really, really, really dark. Okay. And I'm going to show you what this does one by one. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more specifically on this area so you can see what's happening. So if I take the volume scatter and I put that down to 0, it's still dark. And if I take the volume absorption and I put it down to 0, now it's as if there was no volume shading going on. So basically what the volume absorption does, if I set this to a 0.1, is it kind of makes that sort of like dark look. So if you go outside at night and there's no lighting and you only have, let's say, a flashlight or something like that, you'll notice that everything else around you is getting darker, but the area that's lit up you can actually see. So what you can see here is it basically blocks out all that really cool environment lighting. So that's kind of a bummer with using this particular method of creating a finalized image, but I do think that you get a really cool effect, and I'll show you how to deal with the reflections in a little bit. And what you can do with the volume absorption is you can actually change the color. So you can go to a blue, let's say, and it will actually, I'm going to go out this way, so I'm going to move outside of that previewer because you can see a little bit easier. So if you can see the ground here, if I change this to a red, for example, it has changed the overall absorption color to a red, or a yellow, you can see that there, or a green, and so on. So if you wanted to color it and add a little bit of basically like coloring your footage, you can kind of do that, but I really think that it's best to just stick to the gray values and have your lighting actually color that part. And there we go. And as you can see here, the actual color that you have for your value can change the overall way that the volume absorption is happening. So let's keep that to like kind of a gray. And actually, let's make it a lighter gray. So basically, a mixture of this, the value here, the black and white value here, and the density, that is going to govern how much of that absorption is happening. And you can still see back there, basically, I just want enough to where you can't see this object anymore. And if you've seen my intro videos or the intro part of a lot of my other videos, basically what I used for the animation is I kept the volume absorption kind of more dense, and I took the text and I slid it back and into focus. So if I push it back over here and I increase the density to like a 1 or something, you can see that it's back there, it's a lot darker, and it kind of slides in. And I didn't have a let's turn this off so you can kind of see what I'm talking about a little bit clearer. So I'm going to turn the lighting, I'm going to change the strength on this off. Okay, so you can see it's back there in the dark. And if I take the preset light here that we have, so you can see it right here. I'm sorry I'm jumping around a lot, but this is kind of what you got to learn how to do. So up here, change this to a spot, and let's make it like that. And we're going to change all this anyway, but I'm going to make this a little bit more clear what I'm talking about. Bump up the power here to, let's say, 5,000. So you can see it's lit up right here. And then I can actually slide, if I grab this on the Y, I can slide it in, and then there's the text right there. So obviously this isn't the best lighting setup for this particular type of situation. I'm just showing you how the volume absorption works and how you can use it in an animation of text. So out of view, you can't really see it. It's lurking in the shadows, and then it sneaks in from the back, and there it is. So that's how you can do that kind of effect. I'm going to leave it on this spot view here for the moment, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn back on the emission effect. So the next thing here is the volume scatter. So for me to really show you how this is working, I'm going to put this back down to a 0 at the moment, just so I can show you what the volume scatter does. So volume scatter, basically, it's like as if there's a fog. So if you go outside on a foggy night, or I guess if you go in London, I'm in California, in the Southern California area, so I don't get a lot of fog here. But if you go to a place like London or other places that have a lot of fog or anything like that, that's basically a volume scatter. So if we take the density here, pop it up to a 0.2, you can see that it creates this sort of like atmospheric effect. So we have sort of like a more foggy or rainy weather effect. You can see how grainy it is, and I have pretty high powered machine. I'm going to look at it through here, through our camera here. You can see that it does get really grainy, and I'm going to set the density down to like a 0.05 or something, and you can still see that it's there. It's just not as apparent. And if I take the density up to a 1, that's a little bit too high. Let's do a zero point 0.5. How about a 10? Let's try a 10. Oh, that's blowing everything out. So you can see that the higher you set it, kind of the more thick the fog is. And the lower the density, the less, it's like less fog. The anisotropy here, if we take the, and I'm going to do something really quick here. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to show you in a later video, or perhaps on this one if we get to it, where you can track your light to an actual object instead of having to always rotate it. But let's just do it like this for now. So let's do like this. So if you have a really bright light, something like that, and you take the anisotropy and you put it up to a 1, you can see that it kind of like uh, sort of like pushes all of that effect of that foggy effect more towards that area, the point of light. And if I take it and I move it in the opposite direction, you can see that kind of like that the lighting effect is quite a bit different, and anywhere in between. You can play with these values. Actually, I'm doing negative zero point 0.5. You can play with these values and just kind of see what works for you as far as the anisotropy goes. I like to leave it at a 0, at least for beginners, so you can kind of see the general effect that this does and work with that before you start dealing with more of this stuff here. But we're basically going to set this to a zero point 0.1 or maybe a zero point 0.05 or something like that to begin with. And the volume absorption, we're going to set that to a point. I think we want to do like a zero point 0.1. We'll just do that for now. And so you can kind of like play with this at this point, but really what I want to do is show you how to fix the issue where your reflections no longer are showing the environment lighting that we had before. So you could start doing your lighting setup with this setup here for your volume scatter and absorption. But I do want to show you guys how to fix the issue that you can't see that cool reflection. Okay. I'm going to move this over to this side. So I'm just going to grab this and move it over here because we do need to see a bit of the light and reflection. And this is by no means how the final is going to look. It's going to look a lot cooler than this, but, just work with me here. And I'm going to take the volume scatter down because we really don't need to see the volume scatter in order to see if we move around here. If we look at our text, we are not seeing the reflection of the environment anymore. It's just the reflection of the stuff going on inside the scene. And for some of you, this may be perfect, but still, I think that it's a good idea for you to see how to do this next little bit in case you need to show some kind of reflection or you want to. And I'm also going to turn off the lighting here to just save on the render speed. So I'm going to take the light material, and I'm going to take the strength over here, and I'm going to put that down to 0. So all we see is this effect just like this, all right? Now the next thing we want to do is we want to change our view in here. We want to change this from world to object, all right? And that's going to go back to whatever we're selected on instead of the world settings. So not in the light area, but we're going to go to the face. And basically what we have here is we have our basic shading setup with all of our nodes and everything as we already did in the previous part. Now what we want to do is we want the reflection of the environment to show instead of the scene. Now this is not the only way to do this probably, and you may be able to do a mixture of some other things to get a similar effect, but I do want to just show you how to get this particular effect of seeing an environment with the volume absorption and volume scatter, because I really haven't seen any tutorials that help me out with this. I kind of had to discover this a little bit on my own. So if we go up here and we're going to add an input, and we're going to go to texture coordinate, you'll see that in this node, there is called reflection right here. And that's going to govern actually what is reflected in our object here. So if I go and I hit Shift A and I add an actual mapping node, just like we would a picture, because we are going to add a picture here or an image texture. Then I add a texture, not image, but environment texture, and then link these together here. Uh, Holding Alt and right clicking can actually make a node connection for you without having to click and drag these. So we go to Open, and we're going to navigate to an HDRI, or these are high dynamic range images. I talked in my last episode or the last part of this on how to find these. You can go to hdrihaven.com and get these. I'm going to use this industrial one here called Aircraft Workshop. Okay. And if I view through here with Control and Shift and left click, you can see that now the reflection part of the texture coordinate node, that we can now see the background of that HDRI reflected in our object. And as we move the camera around, you can see that it will actually change what we're seeing. So basically what we need to do from here is mix this reflection that we've created and our coloring that we did for the metal here, along with everything else, because we have this is our metal coloring. We also have this roughness map here that is governing the reflectivity, and that is all piping into our principled BSDF to create this here. So we have to do a number of things here. And I'm going to try and keep this as organized as possible. Normally, I would do group nodes and things like that, but since some of you are relatively new to this, we're going to keep it a little bit disorganized, in quotes. So, in order to basically get this cool reflection effect that we have going on here, and our really cool metal coloring effect that we have going on here, what we're going to do is we're going to use our roughness map that's basically being created right here. We're going to ignore this one. This is just for us to control this part of the roughness. You could do it through here, but I'm going to show you kind of like how to control this thing that we're going to create. So what we want to do is we want to add a color mix RGB, take the coloring effect down here and plug it into the bottom, take the aircraft workshop one up here, put it into the top. Then we're going to take this color ramp, we're going to hit Shift D to duplicate and move it up here. So move it right up above. Then you're going to pipe your roughness, which is basically, this is the actual roughness map, and then this one we are controlling how rough and how shiny that is with this one. But take this one right here, or if you're just using a regular image, so let's say you're just using this one image right here, you could use this. But we're going to take this one right here, plug it into the color ramp, and yeah, I know this is messy, but it's fine. We're going to take this part of the color ramp and plug it into the factor, and then view through there. And if you view through here, you can see that we have the lines of the roughness map, and then we have the reflection behind it. And if you pull this over from the right, you can see that you can control how much of that reflectivity is based on this white value here. And then if you take the black and you change this to a more white value, you can actually get rid of that reflection effect altogether. But we want to keep that there. So we're going to pull this down to black, and we're going to get this to a point that we like. And then take that mix node, and you're going to plug this mix node into the base color of your principled BSDF down here, and then view through there. And now what you should be seeing is an effect where we now have the reflection of that environment also integrated into our scene. So you can see here that down in the bottom, so right down in here, we can actually see the environment background and the crack right there of our floor plane are being reflected into our piece. So we have brought back in an environment lighting to this particular material that wasn't there before because of the volume absorption and the volume scattering that's going to be in the background. Now, how visible this is almost entirely dependent, since it's based on reflection. It's almost entirely dependent on the amount of lights that are in your scene. So let's turn back on the strength of our lights here. And let's also take this, and I'm just going to duplicate it and put it a little bit closer. And just move around a little bit just to show you. If I take the face here, move this up, move it back here, you can see that there is reflection changing in this actual image here, or in our material. So you can see it right there. Now, this effect is basically what I did in my initial piece that I did before I started to create this entire series, just to do a quick, proof of concept idea. So basically, from this point here, and you can mess with these. You can change these around. You can use different black and white values here to plug in to change how your reflection is working, or just not use this method at all. It's really up to you on how you want to do that. But basically from here, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to speed up the footage, I'm going to show you basically how you can copy and paste this and put it into the other material. And there we go. So you'll see here, I took the color that was coming out of here, and I piped that into our mix node. And for the color ramp up here, I actually need to grab this one down here. Okay. So basically, that's how you can get your reflections of the environment lighting that you had before you added some world volumetric settings, and make it look a little bit more polished, a little bit more awesome, because you can actually see realistic reflections in that metal or whatever the material is that you decided to put in there. So next thing we're going to do here, and I'm looking through the camera, I'm going to show you guys how to sort of like set up some of your lights and what some of this volumetric stuff really does and how to get the best out of it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually not going to be using spotlights. I'm going to be using IES Light Textures. And I would recommend that you take a look at my beginner's tutorial series where I talk about it. I will put a card up right now so you can check it out, and I'll also put a link to that video in the description below. And you can check out all the details on where to download IES textures and all that kind of stuff. I don't really want to cover that much detail in this particular episode, but I will show you how to add an IES light texture and what it does with the volumetric lights. So I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to delete that one light there, and I'm going to use this light here and show you pretty much how I like to handle this sort of stuff. So IES light textures are great. They basically use a texture to map out the strength of the lamp, and you basically go into your light here, you hit the use nodes button right here, and you hit Shift A, texture, IES texture, and you take the factor and plug that into the strength. And then you click external. If you have these files, internal, I don't think there's anything in here yet, but external, hit the little folder, and I have them saved to this place right here. And just to show you kind of how this works, I'm going to use this display one right here. So basically how it works, and I'll show you with the spotlight, and I'm going to hit, and this is what you guys are going to need to do here. I'm going to hit Shift C to recenter my 3D cursor, hit Shift A, add an empty, planes with axes, and scale it up a little bit. Control A to apply the scale, and I'm going to call this lamp target. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the light, I'm going to go to the constraints, and I'm going to show this from the beginning so you can see what I'm doing. So check out where the orientation of this lamp is. And I'm going to go to constraints here, and I'm going to hit track or select track 2. Okay. Click the little eyedropper and go on to the lamp target that I created, this empty. Okay. And if I take this empty and I move it around, you can see that the light is following it. Okay, and IES light textures are very similar to a spot lamp in the sense that it uses a point of light and then a target to direct how that lighting effect is done. And if I take a look here, you can see that there's different shapes. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail or try not to, but all of these have different sort of sets of math that says how these are going to look when they're presented inside of your 3D program. So with the one that I chose, I got it plugged in here, and I'm going to go to the lamp properties again and click on point. That's the one that you need to use for this to work. Okay. And I'm going to use the previewed render here. And you can see that it got super bright, okay? So these use a different set of math to create the lighting effect. So I'm going to go over here to power, and I'm going to make this a 5, okay? And you can see that there it is. And if I take this lamp and I put it up high, you can see that there's a really nice sort of like soft effect. And you can see that there's a ring of light that goes out here along with the light point right here. It gives a much more natural, realistic way of representing lighting inside of your 3D scene. And I strongly recommend that you start using these and you stop using things like a image plane that's an emission surface and other stuff like that. That kind of stuff, it adds a lot of time to your renders and in my opinion doesn't make it look as real as stuff like this. Okay. So I would strongly recommend doing this IES light technique. So now how does this apply to our volume scatter? So if I take this and I'm going to put it behind the object, okay? And I'm going to go into our camera view here. And I'm going to take this, the target, and I'm going to put it up behind the J. I'm going to target it right over here. And then I'm going to move this lamp and I'm going to turn the overlays over here on, and I'm going to move it right about here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this off again. Go to the world setting, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and make a cool sort of like lighting effect from like coming from behind the text. Okay. So if I go here to volume scatter density, put this to a point 1. Let's start there. You can see it's pretty heavy. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and if you move it around, there maybe isn't a whole lot going on as far as what you can tell. But if you kind of hide it behind an object, you can start to see. And I'll turn on the overlays again. You can start to kind of see what I'm going for here. I want the object to kind of be outlined with these rays coming off of it. Okay, that's the effect that I'm looking for. But it doesn't really seem to be doing that. And if I take the volume scatter and I put it up to a 0.5, you can see that there's just more of this, foggy effect, but I'm not really seeing that super detailed sort of like ray effect. Okay. And what that has to do with is your radius. Okay. So if I go here and I take this down to a zero point zero 0.01, it's more clear the effect. You can see right over here, you can see that there's a line difference between, and you can start to see some bits of the top of the J that's starting to cast off this really cool sort of like light rays. Sometimes they're referred to as God rays. If I put it over here behind the D, right here, you can see a different effect, okay? And you can actually see the shape of that IES light texture. You can see it's brighter here and then right here. Hopefully you guys can see that. Okay. So if I take my lamp and I go here from the world setting over to the object, which is the light, and I change this. So let's say I want to do something else. Let's say I want to do this bollard one here and choose that one. You can see that that lighting is changing. Okay. And if I take the direction of where the light is pointed, and if I back off a little bit here, you can see that effect even in, you can kind of understand that a little bit more. I'm going to turn off the overlays a little bit here. And I'm going to change the targeting. You'll have to watch where I'm targeting it on the right and what's happening on the left. You can see that as I move that target, it's starting to create different effects on how the volumetric lights are sort of being shot off and all of that. You can see there's a little bit of a ray effect right here and all of that. So let's take the lamp, and if I turn on the overlays here, if If I take the lamp and I move it a little bit more, get it even closer to the text, you can see that as you move it closer, the rays are more obvious. And if I change the radius here, let's change this to a 0.2 just so you can see what it looked like before. It's not as obvious when you have it a larger effect. Okay, so let's change this radius back down to a 0.01 and you can see the difference there. So how you set your light setting. So if you used, instead of an IES, you decided you're going to use a spot lamp or an area lamp or a don't use a sun lamp. I wouldn't use that, or a point lamp. That's going to all change how the shaping of your light rays are going to be projected inside of this volume scatter. And you have to check your radius settings to tighten up and make those rays a little bit more obvious, and it's also the amount of power that you set. So the brightness of your lamp is going to change how that lighting effect is. And if we change this here to the world setting and look at this here, it also is the volume scatter setting. So if you set this to a 0.1 or a 0.01 or something like that, you can see that the effect is changing. And if you take the anisotropy up, and let's, set the volume scatter to a 0.1. That is not looking very good. Let's do a 0.5 here. So your anisotropy settings, the density, your lamp properties, what type of light you're using or what type of lamp you're using, all of that is going to change the effect of this. So, my recommendation to prepare yourself for the final render settings and all of that is number one, make sure that you have your material set to where you like it, but also create a lighting setup that is going to take advantage of this really cool volume scatter and absorption technique. And the same thing with the volume scatter here, you can actually change this color too. I didn't say that before, but you can change that color. So that's cool if that's something you want to do. I'm going to change all these back to a 0.8. There we go. Do a lighting setup that you like. If you're not really sure what you like, make sure that you use a 3-point lighting setup to begin with. I think what I would probably do here, just if you want to see what, I might do, I would probably do some sort of spotlight with this up here. So changing this to object, I would maybe set this to let's try this one here and then change this to so you could do something like this where you have this light coming in from above, like, look how, angelic my text is, something like this. Maybe set it behind or something like that. So you have this sort of like skylight coming in from above. Then I can take this light here, duplicate that, and move it over, plop it down a little bit, and change this IES light to maybe this one here, so it's a little more. You can see the shaping here. So this is like cylinder wide, so it's a little bit wider, kind of more of a diffused lighting. So maybe set that to a 5. That's a little bit too much. So maybe a 2.5. And duplicate that again and maybe put that over here. Set it up, maybe set this one up a little higher. Set this one down a little bit. And I'm just quickly putting something together for you guys. This would not be really probably what I would finally do, but just so you guys can see it. So something maybe like this would be, what you would end up with. And of course, make sure that you change the radius size. You don't want them all to be super harsh shadows with the radius at a 0.01. So maybe change this one to a 0.5. And this other one here, change this one to a point, or actually let's change this to a 1 maybe. So it's a little bit more, evenly being cast there. And, maybe something like this could be a final, if that's what you're going for. And you can change the target location of these lights by moving the the target around and finding something that you really like. So, here it's like cast directly on that D. Um, And maybe that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. So spend this next week or however long you're going to spend working on this to sort of like figure out what kind of composition you like, what sort of lighting setup you want, how much of a uh, volume absorption and scatter that you really want to have in your scene. And before we start on our final render next week, really figure that out and creatively play with it. Change some of the lighting of the light around your object. Maybe change some of the metallics if you want, and play around with the ground or the type of reflection that you are projecting from the nodes that I showed you on that material. And I'll see you guys next time on DJ Tutorials.